A post-apocalyptic movie, waited for an entire year, Silo. Season 2 ** Silo is finally out. In one day, the main character will go outside to explore the truth about the past in this apocalypse. To recap a bit, in the future, the environment on Earth has been severely damaged. The air is now filled with toxic gases. The few survivors have to live in underground bunkers. Once they go outside, they can't survive for more than 4 minutes before they die. The story picks up from the end of last season. The main character, Juliet, is punished and kicked out of the bunker. Because of the protection from homemade tape, she does not suffocate from the toxic gases like the others. Soon after, the virtual image on her helmet disappears. Juliet can now see the real world outside the bunker. The surrounding area is barren land. Desolate, gloomy, and hopeless, like an apocalypse has descended. Juliet tries to calm down. After walking for a while, she sees signs of human activity. But inside, Juliet is a bit curious. Why are these corpses not wearing protective gear? As she walks past a dirt mound, she sees another bunker surrounded by dead bodies. They died as if trying to escape from the bunker. Juliet is extremely confused. What happened here? She nervously jumps into the bunker. The corpses inside are piled high. Each step must find a gap. The isolation door only has a small crack, too narrow to fit through. She picks up a candle from the ground. After lighting it, she can see the surrounding scene clearly. She discovers the main door is jammed. Juliet tries to push it, but the door doesn't budge. Luckily, there's an iron rod nearby. She uses all her strength. Together with the weight of her body, she pries the door open. Once inside, Juliet shuts the isolation door to prevent toxic gas from entering. At this point, she realizes the tape on her wrist is torn. Juliet panics and rushes to the cafeteria. She sees the screen displaying the word, lie. She didn't have time to think much and quickly grabbed the tools on the ground, preparing to run down to the deepest repair bunker. But while running, she felt it hard to breathe. The oxygen in her suit was running out. But to remove the helmet, she needed tools. She grabbed the metal rod and smashed the helmet. Juliet gasped for air and quickly twisted open a bottle of liquor she had picked up earlier. The protective gear had been outside for too long, so it needed to be disinfected immediately. After handling everything, Juliet finally had time to take a look at her surroundings. The structure here was similar to the previous bunker. She went into a bedroom and smashed a mirror on the wardrobe. Inside, there was indeed a camera. It seemed like monitoring the residents was a tradition of the bunker management. She found a few well-fitting clothes. Juliet was eager to get out of there. She was very curious. Why was there no one left alive in this bunker? Also, there were traces of a struggle everywhere. Remembering the word, fake, in the cafeteria, Juliet started to piece together the truth. Compared to the other bunkers, the lower-level residents here had lived under oppression and surveillance all year round. One day, they accidentally discovered the deceit of the upper management. They thought there was no toxic gas outside, but a world with blue skies, white clouds, and golden sunshine. So, the lower-level residents joined forces and staged an unprecedented riot. Even though the upper management destroyed the bridge leading to the distribution center, they couldn't extinguish the residents' determination to seek freedom. When the lower-level residents won, they eagerly rushed out of the bunker. Then came the tragic scene that Juliet saw. Bones everywhere. It turned out that there was indeed toxic gas in the air. Juliet was very lucky to have the tape sealing the gaps. Subconsciously, she remembered the first time she met Martha years ago. Since she was young, Juliet had loved fixing machines. That was exactly what Martha liked. So, she took her to her home. She was given an antique from a century ago for study. Perhaps it was this very thing that sparked Juliet's rebellious thoughts. Sorting out her thoughts, she continued exploring the strange basement. She stood on the highest floor, looking around. She saw that the other end of the broken bridge still had lights. Curiously, she walked toward it. Seemingly spotting a figure, Juliet quietly rejoiced. She was eager to meet a living person to ask about the situation here. The bridge was broken, but she wasn't going to give up. She saw a corpse hanging next to the bridge. She pulled it up and found a long rope. Juliet tied one end to the bridge railing. She held tightly onto the rope. She originally planned to swing across, but she miscalculated the rope's length. As a result, the rope frayed continuously and broke. Juliet clung to the bridge, but the surface was too slippery, and she fell down below. Luckily, the basement was flooded with water, and she frantically waved around. Fortunately, she grabbed a floating plastic barrel. Juliet climbed up the ladder, feeling utterly defeated. She yelled in frustration. But she knew the exploration had to continue. She had to uncover more truths about the basement. After changing clothes, Juliet headed to the restricted area of the basement. She remembered the first time she came here with a friend as a child. The walls were covered with many inscriptions from previous generations. Her friend once told her about a person who was left behind here while asleep. The only outcome was death, but he found a way to survive. Juliet remembered this and suddenly felt a glimmer of hope. She returned to the broken bridge. If she couldn't swing across, She decided to make her own bridge. Juliet stacked pipes and steel mesh together. Without fixed ropes, she used plastic bags as a substitute. In the blink of an eye, a steel bridge was completed. But crossing to the other side was a bit tricky. Fortunately, there was a rope here. Juliet tied one end to the bridge. She placed the other end near the other half of the bridge. Once she had it in place, Juliet released the rope, and the bridge settled on the other side of the bridge. Juliet didn't immediately celebrate. She knew what she made was hardly reliable. So she tied a safety rope around herself. She took a deep breath, and then stepped onto her makeshift bridge. The other end continuously cracked and broke. Juliet dared not breathe too heavily, cautiously walking to the middle. She felt the bridge was about to break. With all her strength, she jumped and grabbed the bridge railing. Juliet didn't dare delay. She sawed off the rope tied around her. She climbed up with all her might. There were many corpses here. It seemed that a fierce battle had taken place earlier. Juliet followed the light and found an office. She discovered a light on the desk. It turned out the shadow she saw earlier was just a spinning fan. Juliet felt utterly hopeless. She had used so much energy to come here but still couldn't find anyone alive. Thankfully, returning was easier. Here was a makeshift bridge, which was convenient for getting in and out. Juliet turned the barrel into a wheel. She used force to push it to the bridge. With the sound of the barrel hitting, a sturdy bridge was completed. Juliet was about to turn back, when she suddenly heard music from behind. She was very confused. She guessed that someone had just turned on the music. She walked toward the music. Juliet passed through a thick steel door. The music grew louder. Juliet listened carefully. She confirmed the music was coming from behind this door. But the door was locked tight, and she couldn't open it with her own strength. While Juliet was thinking of a way, a gap appeared in the steel door. A man revealed his two eyes. He seemed to be living very comfortably inside. He warned Juliet not to bother him anymore. According to tradition for many years, every criminal who is exiled has the right to clean the cameras outside. Otherwise, years of dirt would make it difficult for the underground residents to see the outside world. After cleaning, Juliet threw away the rag. At this moment, she stubbornly believed that the scene the residents saw was fake. The nature before her eyes was the real world. Until Juliet touched the ground, she realized what she saw was an illusion. In fact, what the residents in the silo saw was the truth. The residents in the silo were extremely agitated, vowing to overthrow the leaders who only spoke lies. This seemed to be the ultimate end for every silo. The low-level residents of Silo 18, after seeing Juliet survive the toxic gas, even crossed the dirt slope. Everyone became extremely excited. Juliet's actions proved that the outside world was not dangerous. Low-level residents lived in darkness, unable to bear the hard labor day after day. No matter what, they had to go outside. The biggest problem now was the leadership of the silo. Mayor Ben Dapp. According to the management rules set by the founders, if the cleanup mission failed, then war must be declared. Ben frowned. Then, the red alarm bell rang. He rushed out of the secret room and ran outside. Seeing the residents of all levels becoming chaotic, the guards began to stop the residents from running in panic. Officer Robert ran over to explain that he had initiated an emergency, and summoned the entire reserve raiding team. Bernard nodded, and simultaneously issued several orders. At 8 p.m. every night, curfew will be enforced, and Robert will be in charge of the police. He must monitor the people who knew Juliet, especially the two people on this list. Judge Merto was also woken by the alarm bell. She didn't directly supervise Juliet's punishment, but heard about it from the soldiers. Not only did she survive, but she also wiped the camera clean. These were things that had never happened in years. The lower-level law enforcement was still trying to calm the crowd. Seeing the situation spiraling out of control, the repair supervisor, Knox, stepped forward. He praised Juliet's achievements according to everyone's opinion, quickly calming everyone down. At this moment, Juliet's best friend, Shirley, interrupted with a question. Didn't you accuse Juliet so she would get arrested? Knox paused for a few seconds. After thinking carefully, he explained to everyone. If we don't hand Juliet over to the judicial system, then most of us will be in deep trouble. Shirley immediately interrupted. Then I'll cut the power and shut down the air filtration system. At that point, they'll have to accept it. This is the courageous resistance of the lower-class residents, since the power here is maintained and operated by them. This time, even Knox, the manager, had no way out. Suddenly, someone sprayed water at the crowd. It turned out to be Juliet's teacher, Martha. She held a very high position in the hearts of the lower-class residents. With just a few words, she dispersed the crowd. Knox hurriedly ran over. He reminded Cooper not to add fuel to the fire. Otherwise, the consequences could be unimaginable. Shirley just glared at him and turned away. Shirley was filled with resentment. She believed Knox had betrayed Juliet. At the same time, she wondered why Juliet didn't die after going outside. She guessed that Martha must have helped her. But Martha could never admit to that. At this moment, there was a knock on the door. It turned out to be Manager Bernard. He had received orders from the Judicial Department. He was required to summon Martha to the police station. She was extremely worried. Could it be that her helping Juliet had been discovered? After she saw someone detained at the police station, her suspicions were confirmed. Because the person was in charge of the materials department. The tape Juliet used was supplied by this person. When Manager Bernard and his subordinate left, Martha quickly asked the person, "Did you confess everything?" The person shook her head. She hadn't been interrogated yet, but she was ready to take the blame alone, rather than have both of them share the punishment. Martha disagreed with her approach. After all, she was the one who made the plan. She suggested keeping quiet. Don't admit anything. At most, she would just be killed. After all, staying in the silo and dying is no different. Kumathan had seen the arrest with her own eyes. In her heart, she had already deduced the truth. It must be that the tape from the IT department had a problem. It caused everyone who left the silo to die. And Juliet survived thanks to the tape Kumathan gave her. She decided that no matter what, she would reveal the truth to everyone. As for Juliet leaving, it still affects a lot of people. The execution robot wanted to take over the police station. Juliet's assistant Paul started to make things difficult. According to the silo's law, Robert was a witness who saw Juliet commit the crime. He was required to repeat the testimony to Paul. Robert tried to hold back his anger. Half jokingly, half seriously, he recounted Juliet's crime. She had said herself that she wanted to leave. Paul immediately seized on this flaw. If she wanted to leave, why did she still try to run from the judicial system? Robert was at a loss for words. He just said something vague and turned to leave. Knox, who had a broad vision, was very worried that a riot would break out. So, he ran to the production department. He told the person in charge there not to make weapons for others on their own. As for Judge Meadows, after hearing her subordinate's report on Juliet's exit from the silo, her expression showed a bit of joy. Then she poured alcohol into the sink. When Bernard unexpectedly came to invite Meadows for a drink, Meadows said she was quitting drinking from now on. Bernard was a bit awkward. It turned out that he had come to ask Meadows for help. Bernard decided to give a speech this afternoon. He wanted to invite Meadows to speak on his behalf. But unexpectedly, Meadows refused outright. Bernard had no choice but to use the hardship strategy. It turned out that they used to be teacher and student. He promised that he could give Meadows anything she wanted. A bigger room. Even antique items that she liked. Meadows suddenly said he still didn't understand me. Then he took a book titled The Wizard of Oz. He said he was very much like the main character in it. No one noticed that the main character was a fraud. He often played different roles to deceive the people. But in the end, the main character sits in a hot air balloon and flies away. It turns out what Meadows wanted was freedom. By that afternoon, all the residents gathered in the center of the mayor's vault. Bernard stood up to start his speech. He didn't criticize Juliet's criminal behavior, but praised her as the greatest hero in history. Because earlier, the Ministry of Information had invented a new type of tape. It could prevent toxic gases from leaking into the protective suits. And Juliet voluntarily said she wanted to personally test it. That's why there was a scene of her going outside. Bernard said this was the achievement of humans conquering a toxic environment. Amidst the crowd's cheers, everyone clapped enthusiastically. At that moment, Bernard declared that one day everyone would be able to safely leave the vault. At this point, Meadows stood up. She praised Bernard as the wisest leader. To celebrate this victory, she decided to add 5 points to each household. This was a very practical benefit. Everyone happily applauded. Suddenly, among the crowd, Shirley's voice said that everything was a lie. In fact, the Ministry of Information had deliberately provided fake tape. What Juliet used wasn't new tape at all. It was the high-quality tape we usually use. At this point, a guard interrupted Shirley's words. They were preparing to take her away. Knox stood up to ask for Shirley's release. He said that she was just upset and speaking nonsense. Along with Hank, who also stood up to assure that the guards wouldn't arrest Shirley anymore. But after this incident, no one believed Shirley's words anymore. After the speech ended, Robert rewarded the residents who had enthusiastically cheered. Then he went to Bernard to report. The lower-level residents had calmed down a lot. It seems the consequences of the rebellion have disappeared. He immediately opened the prison door. He signaled for the two people to leave. Because Bernard had explained the origin of Juliet's tape, Martha walked out of the prison, confused. She realized the power of leadership to distort the truth. When Bernard walked past the stairs, he saw the letters spelling out, "Juliet isn't dead," along the road. He dejectedly went to Meadows. She praised his perfect performance. She believed he was born to be a leader. Bernard agreed with this. He believed managing the people was like programming a computer. Although the explanation about the tape was a bit unreasonable, his goal was to present a different narrative to everyone. If someone deliberately exposes the truth and tries to overthrow the story, he would not be lenient. At that point, it wouldn't be too late to use force. Juliet's misfortune was being a victim under Bernard's cunning hand. She couldn't convince anyone to believe her. She could only scribble on the walls. Fortunately, the colleagues next to Shirley trusted her and stood by her side, because most of them had worked with Juliet before. But at this moment, Martha came over. She advised everyone not to be so naive. None of them could deal with this situation, because this issue touched the very foundation of the vault's rules. Shirley naively believed that if she called for more people, they would succeed. Martha shook her head. The Justice Department holds all the weapons. If Shirley's goal was to rally everyone to uncover the truth, then she could now say that Juliet is not dead. Meanwhile, Bernard, in order to thank Meadows for standing by his side, promised to fulfill any request she had. Unexpectedly, she said she greatly admired Juliet's former life. Then she said one thing. I want to go outside. The main character, Juliet, went to Vault 17. Inside a central vault, she discovered the only survivor. This man hadn't seen any people in years. He was curious about where Juliet came from. Which vault did she come from? There are 50 in total. Juliet learned that these vaults are scattered, with 50 in total. Juliet was somewhat surprised by this. The management definitely knew the truth. But why did they hide the passage connecting the vaults? The man inside told her that this was to prevent those who wanted to start a rebellion from finding an escape route. Compared to independent operation, there is another benefit. If something happens in any vault, it won't affect the others. Juliet, like a sponge, tried to absorb this confidential information. At the same time, she was curious about who the other person really was. Perhaps because of the long loneliness. The man inside kept talking non-stop. His name was Solo. He was originally just an apprentice to the IT department head. When the riot broke out, he received an order from his teacher to hold his ground in the vault and not let anyone in, because all the vault secrets were stored there. No wonder Solo knew so much. But Juliet was even more curious about what had happened here. Solo said everything started with that cleanup. A resident was expelled from the vault. But not only did he fail to clean the camera, he also wrote the word, lies, on it. Even more surprising, he managed to get far away. He disappeared from everyone's sight. This made everyone think that the outside was safe. This sparked a rebellion. They killed all the managers and opened the vault. As a result, all the residents died from the toxic gas. The more Juliet listened, the more horrified she became. What the other person described sounded so similar to what happened to her in Vault 18. She didn't want the people there to die because of her. Juliet turned around and left. She had to return to Vault 18. But she quickly realized her protective gear was damaged, and there were no supplies left in the storage. Even the components were scarce. In Juliet's heart, the panic only grew. The situation in Tunnel 18 was just as she feared. Although Bernard had used a reassuring speech to calm the residents, there were still people who believed they knew the truth. They caused chaos everywhere, urging people to rise up. The law enforcement acted decisively. They arrested a repairman for graffiti. But this scare tactic had no effect on the residents. Instead, it ignited their anger even further. Mayor Bernard took Meadows to the central tunnel. He was still troubled by the warning from the previous generation. If the cleanup mission fails, prepare for war. In fact, Bernard had already started preparing for this. Meadows suspected that arresting the graffiti artist was just Bernard's order. But she thought this method was too extreme. After all, Juliet's situation had never happened before. They couldn't just follow the management manual. Before leaving, Meadows asked Bernard, "Did Juliet really say, 'I want to go outside'?" Bernard confirmed it without hesitation. Meadows then went to see Chief Paul. Paul had once been her subordinate. So, she asked him. But he couldn't give a definitive answer. After returning, Paul interviewed witnesses, including another soldier who was hesitant. Paul immediately reported this to Meadows. Juliet might have been framed. Meadows now understood everything. She never expected her revered mentor to have something to hide. Meadows sadly took an old projector. This was something prohibited by the laws here. But the ban didn't apply to people in high positions. In the video, a father and child were playing by the sea. Who would have thought that in that era, people could feel the beauty of nature? This was the reason Meadows wanted to leave. Bernard, however, didn't heed her advice. He became arrogant, disregarding any means. Robert received orders from him and immediately sought out Kenneth, who had helped Juliet escape and was still locked up. Robert used amnesia drugs to threaten Kenneth into helping him with something. Next, he went to find a retired raid team member. He wanted them to form a team again, or face harsh labor on the lowest floors. It seemed that the management had adopted a tough approach. Bernard had clearly recognized the problem. The lower-level residents were starting to stir. Even Juliet's father had defied the tunnel's law. He no longer kept a contraceptive ring in his body to deceive others. At this time, Shirley took a colleague from the machinery department to the police station. They demanded the release of the repairman. A fierce dispute soon broke out between the two sides. But no one noticed the man in the corner. He suddenly threw a lit bottle of oil towards the crowd. The scene immediately became chaotic. The raid team opened fire on the crowd. As the residents fled in panic, only lifeless bodies remained on the ground. The deceased was once Juliet's student, someone who always supported her, but was shot dead in this riot. Bernard, pleased, went to Meadows. His crackdown plan had succeeded, and it stirred up hatred in the machinery department. At that point, the law enforcement would have a legitimate reason to suppress them. Meadows advises not to treat others as fools, but she doesn't care about such things at this moment. Bernard, of course, understands her intention. He helped Meadows find a way to leave. He would use the excuse of repairs, turning off the displays in the dining hall and the police station. Meadows has 5 minutes to leave the bunker and climb over the hill. But before that, she must first get a properly fitted protective suit. While taking measurements, Meadows asked, "Did Juliet really say, 'Do I want to go outside?'" This question made Bernard unable to look her in the eye. The Juliet in Bunker 17 couldn't find a protective suit. She had to return to the main bunker. She saw a food box placed in front of the door. Solo had left it outside for her, and she grabbed it to eat hungrily. She hadn't eaten anything since leaving the bunker. Solo said, "The materials for the protective suits come from the supply department, but the lower floors are flooded." Juliet felt gloomy. After all, the protective suit's materials can't be easily replaced. The helmet alone had an imaging function. When she first stepped out of the bunker, she noticed the scene was identical to the video on the hard drive. Juliet felt that everything was fake. So she wiped the camera briefly and threw the cloth away. She asked, why were the two corpses in the lobby so differently decomposed? It seemed they had died recently. This question seemed to touch Solo. He immediately closed the door. Juliet realized she had spoken out of turn. She just thanked him for the food and turned to leave. At that moment, Solo opened the door again. He said he wasn't a good person. He just wanted to confirm if Juliet was real. It turned out that Solo had been alone for so long that illusions often appeared in his mind. Juliet felt a bit sorry for him. But at midnight, she was woken up by loud music. It turned out that now was the time when Solo was most clear-headed. His mind was sharper. He said if the protective suit couldn't be found, they could use a firefighting suit as a replacement. It could be found in the recovery department on the 23rd floor. Juliet was thrilled. She grabbed a lamp and headed to the 23rd floor, only to find it was half flooded. She had no choice but to ask Solo for help. Juliet planned to dive underwater to find the protective gear, but someone needed to operate the oxygen device. Solo immediately refused. He couldn't go outside. Juliet continued pleading. She was worried about the tens of thousands of lives in Bunker 18. She had to hurry back to stop them. But Solo insisted on not opening the door. At this moment, Juliet noticed a line of text written on the wall behind her. "We'll get in sooner or later." Juliet finally realized. It turned out, the two corpses in the big trench didn't die from poison gas. They had deliberately charged into the main bunker. As a result, Solo had killed them. Juliet finally understood Solo's fear. She was a bit disappointed and turned to leave. Unexpectedly, just as she was leaving, Solo shouted, "Don't go." He had finally gone outside. For all these years, Solo had longed to see the outside world. Even though the bunker was small, he felt incredibly expansive. After several encounters, Solo realized Juliet wasn't a bad person. That's why he gathered the courage to go outside. Juliet was also delighted and helped him. Next, she must return to Silo 18. That concludes episodes 1, 2, and 3 of Season 2 of the Silo series. Would you like us to release more episodes? If yes, please leave a comment below to let us know. If enough of you want to watch, we will definitely continue. Thank you for your interest and support. Goodbye and see you again soon.